The next big transformation is upon us, and it really builds perfectly off of the grounding that Shane provided us. This isn't just about creating digital displays. It's about taking us to the next stage of our evolution. Think about where we've come from. Think about all that we've seen over the last 20 years. You step back to the late 1990s, we were living in a very analog world. And then in quick succession, we began replacing analog products with digital ones. That's been the defining characteristic of the last 20 years. The next 20 years, the next 2 decades, is going to be defined by this shift from digitization to datafication. What this really unlocks is about unlocking new economic models, finding new value propositions. Before we move forward, let me step back in our history. I'm going to go back to the 1990s, when in the United States, we are having a massive political battle over what was your favorite soda, Pepsi versus Coke. And Pepsi was going around the country, and they were doing these blind taste challenges where they would take a little bit of Pepsi and a little bit of Coke, and they would ask people, what did they prefer, which one did they prefer? And in these studies, they were revealing that the majority of Americans, over half of Americans, preferred Pepsi over Coke. So in this room, where are my Pepsi drinkers? I know there's some Pepsi Max drinkers out there. Coke drinkers, a few of you there. Urge drinkers, where am I? It's always, you're the last country left with Urge, right? We tried this everywhere else, and Norway was the only place this soda survived. So there's got to be some Urge drinkers in this room. So Coca-Cola started to look at this research, and they got worried because they started doing the same market research and discovering the same things. People were preferring Pepsi over Coke. So Coca-Cola devised a new business model, brand new plan to combat what they saw as changing preferences in the United States, changing soda preferences. See, Pepsi was a sweeter soda, and so they perceived this to be a fundamental shift in what consumers wanted. Consumers were shifting from their traditional flavor to a sweeter soda. They decided to come out with an entirely new soda. This wasn't just a soda that was going to sit next to all of their existing flavors. This was a soda that was going to replace their traditional formula. New Coke. It also shows you peak marketing in the 1980s. Like, this is a bet the firm decision. They're going to change their entire business. What are they going to call this entirely new product? New Coke. Now, this was a colossal failure. Within months, people were writing in letters, they were complaining, they were stockpiling Coke. I'm sure there are still barns somewhere in the United States that there's a Trans Am, or maybe there's a DeLorean sitting there, and then right next to it is all of these bottles of Coca-Cola that were stockpiled. Within months, Coca-Cola reversed course. They got rid of New Coke. They brought back their original formula. Of course, because they had discontinued it, they had to give it a new name. What did they call it? Classic Coke, right? So they bring it back. Now let me fast forward into their timeline. In the 1990s, they introduced freestyle machines. Many of you have probably experienced freestyle machines. There's over 50,000 of them in the world. What you might not realize is that this is really a supply chain technology. This was built to help restaurants understand what has been consumed. So restaurant owners at the end of the night could go and physically download the data from these machines to see what had been consumed and what they needed to replenish, what sodas had been consumed and what they needed to replenish. Later on, as we moved into the future of this technology, they connected it to the internet. Again, still to help restaurants more easily get the data of what had been consumed so they knew how to service the machine, what to replenish so that the customer could have a good experience. One of the byproducts of this machine, of course, was that you could create any soda mixture that you want. You could mix and match, you could pour anything you want. And Coca-Cola realized when they connected these machines that they could also start to see what people were consuming everywhere in the world and how tastes and preferences were changing and evolving. What people were drinking in Oslo versus Paris versus Washington, D.C. or New York. They could see how things were changing in real time. And they started to harvest that data and pour that into their business models. As part of this process, they did a competition where they pitted 5 different soda flavors against each other. Now, the way you voted for your favorite flavor wasn't by sending an email, calling, texting. The way you voted for your favorite flavor was you went to one of these soda machines and you poured that drink. Every pour was a vote. Whoever got the most votes won that $10,000 prize. They were harvesting that data that was really a byproduct of the technology. It was never designed to tally votes or to see the tastes and preferences, but this byproduct became a core attribute of the technology. And Coca-Cola started to use that data to inform product decisions. The very first product they introduced was Cherry Sprite. Later on, they introduced Orange Vanilla Coke. More recently, they introduced Starlight. What is Starlight? I have no idea. Space flavored, whatever that means. But I can guarantee without a doubt, that they were using data from the machines, data that we gave them freely, data that was a byproduct of a supply chain technology to understand and to inform the products that they were bringing to market. More recently, they introduced a new soda flavor. This is Y3000. This is designed to be a taste of soda in the year 3000 because, according to Coke, we're all still going to be drinking soda in the year 3000. And you'll notice that this is been co-created with AI. They argue that this is the first soda that was co-created with AI. Now, we know the fuel of AI is data. Where's Coca-Cola getting all of this data to drive the algorithms that are creating new formulas? It's coming off of these freestyle machines, off this technology that was designed as a supply chain technology. The byproduct being data is now informing the products that Coca-Cola brings to market. This is the opportunity as we move from digitization to datafication. It isn't just getting a glimpse of our operations, it's redefining our operations. Satya Nadella writes that business logic will move from code that's being written to code that's learned from data, creating a completely new generation of business process and productivity systems. It's taking the data and informing the business that we're in. I think most of us misunderstand the business that we are in today. You're all data companies. And data is going to dictate and drive the decisions that you make moving forward. But more importantly, it's also going to drive how the business evolves and how the business changes. And that's what we're starting to see today as we move from digitization to datafication. Business models are being rewritten, processes and procedures are being rewritten. But when we have this conversation, we're often talking about improving operations, we're talking about reducing costs, we often focus on minimizing downtime. What if it's more? What if the real value in this shift as we move from digitization to datafication is about fundamentally rewiring our organizations? I think that's the opportunity and that's the potential. Not just improving things on the margin, but fundamentally changing the businesses that we run today. You're already starting to see these business models shift. One of the earliest ones we saw from jet manufacturers like Rolls-Royce, where they did power by hour. This shifted the traditional business model, what was a traditional cell of a jet engine that had some carry-on service product, to integrate that and drive it out of data. So data became the fuel for this business model, turning terabytes of data into predictive maintenance, into service, into keeping airplanes in the air and off the ground. You're also starting to see other business models evolve as they look at, again, the byproduct, data being the byproduct of these services being poured back into the organization. This is Mercedes, who late last year introduced a new service called SoundDrive. Now, SoundDrive takes the sensor data from the vehicle, the accelerometer data, the gyroscope data, and incorporates it into the listening experience of the user. So as you drive, how you drive dictates the music that you listen to. They partnered with will.i.am to bring this to market. Here's will.i.am describing this transformation.
In this new renaissance, music is composed, rearranged, and made by simply driving. And the instrument and orchestra is the car. The conductor is you, the driver.
Yeah.
And every single commute and drive will create something different. Yo, that is freaking cool. It's freaking stupid fresh. That is stupid fresh, bro. And I can't wait to see what other artists, little bells and whistles and tricks and nuances, how they imagine. Now you know what's possible. Why does the song have to be, okay, at this part, 14 bars in, I'm gonna do this, and then after the chorus comes, and then after the chorus is the bridge. Like, why does that have to be the limitation of imagination when it comes to song creation? That is not it. This is the future.
Yeah, because girls is players too.
Wow, I did that. I did that for my turn. It brings a whole new terminology to traffic jams. Because I'm jamming, bro. I'm jamming.
So if you have teenage children, you're probably very worried about this technology. You can see them swerving to change the way the music plays, accelerating, braking quickly. But think about what's happening here. The data from the vehicle, which was never designed to drive the music experience, is being used as a key input into the music experience. Data was a byproduct of the driving experience. The sensor data was capturing this, and now they're pouring it back into an entirely new aspect of that driving experience. I think that's the real opportunity as we think about, as Shane mentioned, industrial intelligence. It's about taking this byproduct, the data that's being captured in different places, and pouring it into, not just back into that same place, but into entirely new parts of the business. Take, for example, John Deere. John Deere has introduced what they call their See and Spray tractor. This is a tractor that has a 120-foot boom on the back of the tractor. As it travels down the field, it sprays herbicides to kill weeds and other things like that. They've outfitted that boom with 32 cameras. So now as it travels down the field, rather than spray the entire field with herbicides or pesticides, they can spray just the weeds. The cameras identify the weeds and spray just the weeds. Last year, they ran this over 1 million acres, and they saved over 8 million gallons in chemicals. They estimate that they save about 2/3 of the normal chemical use. Interesting, but what's more interesting is how it starts to change the business. Farmers now can start to be more selective. They can buy higher grade chemicals because they're using less. They can afford more expensive chemicals because they're using less. But it's also changed how John Deere interacts with farmers. Historically, John Deere built the tractor and sold it to the farmers, and that was it. A distributor might come in and service it, but they were very hands-off. This technology, rather than selling it to the farmer, they're selling it on a per acre basis. In the US, it's $4 an acre. Whether you have a 1,000-acre farm or a 10,000-acre farm, it's the same per acre price. Now the farmer is much more deeply embedded with John Deere, and John Deere is more deeply embedded in the success of the farmer. It's changed the relationship that they have with the customer directly. It's changed how they think about building technology. In the past, they might have built a tractor, sold it for cost plus margin, poured some of that margin back into the business, built a better tractor, sold that for cost plus margin. The business model has fundamentally shifted as a result of this shift to datafication. When we talk about these big transformations, we often think about multi-year contracts, we think about painful integrations, we think about a long-term change. I want you to think about transformations with a small t. Think about the small wins that you can get. And I think datafication opens up the opportunity for continuous wins. Yes, this will play out over the next 2 decades, but we can win as we make this progress forward. So start to look for the small gains that you can capture as you move from digitization to datafication. We're already starting to see some of these things happen. Georgia-Pacific is a major manufacturer in the US and globally. They have over 140 facilities. They mostly produce paper products. And one of the things that they realized in the last 24 months was that they had distributed intelligence across their facilities. They had grown through acquisition, so they had different equipment in different plants. They had workers who understood how to use that equipment because they had been there for many years, who were set to retire. So they were losing the institutional knowledge as their workers retired. Some of the knowledge on how to use that equipment and how to troubleshoot that equipment was in physical manuals that were only available in those certain plants. Some of them had digital documentation. It was scattered through the organization. So they used AI to aggregate all of that information across all of their facilities. So you can see what plant has which equipment, how to talk to different pieces of equipment, how to troubleshoot it. They captured interviews with some of their workers before they retired so that they could capture that know-how, that institutional knowledge, and they codified that knowledge into the business practices. Think about many of your facilities today. You're probably operating across different countries. In each of those countries, you're probably operating in the native language. If you want to understand what's happening, you've got to talk to somebody in that facility who can look at it in that native language. But when we move from digitization to datafication, when we overlay AI on that, we can start to operate in a unified language. We can start to understand what's happening across our facilities in a single language, and we can start to have visibility into this in real time. Another big shift in this, and Shane mentioned it, is the move to agentic AI. We're starting to turn agents into operators inside of our environment, taking data and being able to make that data actionable at even very, very low levels. It's really all about operationalizing AI. And so what we will see as we move through this piece, this shift to datafication, is that AI and agentic AI will be a big component. There's so much focus on AI today. I think AI is just a small piece of this much broader shift, this much bigger shift that's taking place. When it comes to agentic AI, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said that the IT department of every company is going to be the HR department of AI agents moving forward. And so I think you need to start thinking about your organizations differently. Where does AI fit on your org chart? Are you thinking about it as a tool, or are you thinking about it as a persona that exists within your organization? I also think that the way we train employees is going to shift. The way we think about our workforce is going to shift. Every employee at every level moving forward will be a manager of agentic AI, will be a manager of agents. And we don't train all of our employees to be managers. And so the way we upskill our workers, the way we train our workers, the way we even hire people is going to change because their roles are shifting. It isn't just about them using AI to augment their job, it's about them managing AI agents for the success of the organization. Now, bringing all of these AI agents to life, you see things like self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles. This is Waymo, which over the next year is set to double their fleets. They've moved from, in the US, providing about 100,000 rides a month to now several 100,000 rides a month. They've seen massive growth. This isn't a technology that we're trying to figure out anymore. This is a technology that is active on the roads. And so we've moved it from some plausible, possible future to a practical, applicable future that is available now and is scaling quickly. But it wasn't born on open roads. We didn't just take this technology and throw it out on open roads and say, good luck. This is a technology and this is an application that was born in data. It was born in simulations. And Waymo, early on, as they were testing these vehicles with safety drivers in place, anytime anything happened that felt abnormal, they would go back to the lab and they would run millions of simulations. The very first time that a self-driving vehicle caused an accident, they went back to the lab and ran that scenario 3 million times. And they took the learning from those 3 million simulations, and they redeployed the technology. And what's interesting about this is they didn't just redeploy it on that single vehicle, they redeployed it on every vehicle in their fleet. And that's what makes this move from agentic AI to autonomous systems so interesting, is we can aggregate the learning that's happening everywhere. And think about Shane's comment about industrial intelligence. It isn't just taking the learning of one piece of equipment or one plant, one facility. It's taking that learning, that knowledge, and scaling it across your entire operations in real time. But what you'll see is before you do that, before you take learnings and you scale it, you're going to run it through millions and millions of simulations to drive the real learning and scale that across your platform. Earlier this year, we saw NVIDIA release Cosmos. Cosmos is a platform that is driving AI into the physical world, primarily around robotics and around the deployment of AI into the physical space. And Shane mentioned that data for the physical world is often quite scarce. So in NVIDIA's case, they created a synthetic database using, as Shane mentioned, those physical principles so that it's grounded in physics. And now you can run those simulations in a variety of settings. Millions and millions of simulations across all different possible realities before you deploy that into the real world. And then we start to see robots operating in the physical world because they've lived in a simulated environment over thousands and millions of different simulations. And so then they're ready to deploy and scale at a much faster rate. Or when it comes to synthetic media, for those of you who are just tired of being on Zoom calls, here's technology from NVIDIA that makes it look like you're looking at the camera, even if you're not looking at the camera. This is very popular during the World Cup and during other big sporting events because it'll make it look like you're paying attention even though you're not paying attention. One of the big challenges in a transformation like this, moving from digitization to datafication, is that we have to guard against narrow predictions on what our future will look like. It's easy to take a look at technology and say, I see where this is going. I know how this is going to play out. But who would have ever thought that the accelerometers and gyroscopes in a car would dictate the music that we listen to? Or that John Deere might fundamentally change their business model because data became available and changed how they interacted with their customers. So it's easy to say, I know where this is going to go, I see how this is going to play out, but you have to be open to being wrong in this new paradigm that we're entering. You have to be open to trying new things and experimenting. And I think one of our biggest hurdles in moving forward is our people. Partly because our people are so good at what they do. They have optimized operations over decades of experience in some instances. They know how to do their job so well that they don't want to change how they do their job. And they especially don't want to change their job. And as leaders, I think one of the things you're going to have to do is get your people to see that the future is going to be decidedly different. That they're going to have to think about the work that they do in a new way. Let me close with one final story. Now, if you were here last year, you heard Shane tell the story about Garry Kasparov. Many of you will know the story about Garry Kasparov. I want to share something that you may not know about how Garry Kasparov played out after he lost to IBM's Deep Blue. Just to recap for those of you who don't know, in 1985, Garry Kasparov is 22 years old. He becomes the world's youngest chess champion in that year, 1985. But before he became the world's youngest chess champion, he's in Hamburg and he's playing 32 computers simultaneously. Now, he's coming of age at a time where we're using AI to solve games of logic, things like chess. And he beats every single one of those computers. Leaves that tournament 32-0. Later that year becomes the world's youngest chess champion. Fast forward to 1996, he's in Philadelphia. He's playing just one computer now. He's playing IBM's Deep Blue. He would go on to beat IBM's Deep Blue in that tournament. IBM would challenge him to a rematch on the spot, offering prize money of over $1 million. Garry Kasparov gladly accepts, thinks, I've beat it once, I can beat it again. This is how that was described, that rematch, the brain's last stand. And just one more example of computers taking over if Garry Kasparov doesn't win, and probably the death of chess if Garry Kasparov doesn't win, because who's going to play chess if the best chess player can't even beat a computer? Garry Kasparov shows up in New York City, 1997, plays IBM's Deep Blue, loses to IBM's Deep Blue, as many of you know. He was not happy about how that turned out. Rethinking, maybe I shouldn't have accepted that prize money. Now, here's the part you probably don't know. Coming out of that tournament, Garry Kasparov got involved in an entirely new tournament. These were called freestyle tournaments, free play tournaments. And in these tournaments, you could enter as an individual. If you were a chess grandmaster, you wanted to rely on your knowledge and your intuition, you could enter as yourself. If you were a software developer, you could enter your software program into that tournament. Or you could form a team. You could come together, several people, multiple machines, and enter as a single entity. And what they found was it wasn't the best software programs that were winning these tournaments. It also wasn't the best people that were winning these tournaments. Rather, it was 2 strong amateurs with 5 software programs that were winning these tournaments. They didn't rely on their own intuition and their own knowledge, but they understood which technology to use for which place. And writing about this, Garry Kasparov says, weak human plus machine plus better process was superior to a strong computer alone and more remarkably superior to a strong human plus machine plus inferior process. I think this is your challenge. It isn't about getting the best people. It's also not about getting the best technology. You have to figure out how to bring them together. You have to figure out how to bring your best people together with the best technology and to create entirely new ways of working. I think these are the super teams that we are trying to develop now. And I think that the businesses and organizations that will define the future will be the ones that can create these super teams. The best people with the best machines, but most importantly, entirely new processes. Thank you very much. Point number 1 I'll make is that AI is fundamentally changing knowledge management. It's changing how we think about information. It's going to change how you operate, but it's also, more importantly, going to change how the businesses that you serve operate. And some of that's showing up as simple chatbots, things that help automate services. Here's an HR example where an HR chatbot provides information about maybe how much leave you have, what the policies are, so an employee could go on and get the answers that they need without having to interrupt a human. One of the things that happens here is that it allows HR professionals, just like it would allow professionals in every piece of our business, to focus on much bigger projects, much bigger problems, and work on much bigger solutions. They don't have to spend 80% of their day anymore answering routine questions. They can focus on much bigger things. I think the other thing to recognize is that some of these technologies are intersecting with much broader trends playing out in society. At the same time that we're starting to automate some of these experiences, we're having a workforce develop where you've got younger workers that may not want to interact with
other humans in the same way that prior generations did. The same kids who lost their senior prom have now entered the workforce, graduating from college, graduating from technical schools, and are now in the workforce. And they had a very different experience interacting with humans and interacting with technology. And if you doubt me, I challenge any of you right now to go call your children and see if they will pick up the phone. Because if they're like my kids, they won't. They have a phone in their pocket. In fact, most of the times they're holding it in their hand and they still don't answer the phone. I called my son the other day, actually, and he texted me back and he said, "Why are you calling me?" And I didn't realize I needed to get pre-authorization to call my own children. He texted me, he said, "Dad, only call me if it's an emergency." So I took that to note. Then the other day, he called me, and so of course I texted him back. I said, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "My tuition hasn't been paid." I said, "Only call me if it's an emergency." He didn't like that so much. We're seeing companies start to use AI to augment the services and the way that they interact. JetBlue integrated AI into their customer service experience. Now, they didn't replace their customer service experience, but they augmented the information that that customer service agent had access to. They estimate that they cut down the average call by 280 seconds. Now, that may not feel like a lot, but all of us who have been on those calls would gladly have those 280 seconds back. In JetBlue's case, that's about 75,000 hours a quarter that they saved. I recently talked to the biggest call center operator in the world, and they've told me that they are fundamentally hiring differently now because of AI. In the past, you hired somebody who could type very fast because they had databases, they were trying to retrieve information, so you needed somebody who could type fast and speak English. But AI is fundamentally changing that because AI is augmenting the information that becomes available. They're listening to that same conversation. They're surfacing that information that that agent is providing. And so the information's already there. You don't need to type fast. You don't need to search quickly. But you do have to have a different skill set. So now they're hiring for empathy. They're hiring for listening. They're hiring for a different skill set than they did in the past. And I think the same will come to all of our businesses and the businesses in which we serve. The skill set will start to evolve as we recognize that AI is changing how information flows. Georgia Pacific was running into a challenge where that they saw the critical information on how to operate their machines was dispersed. So Georgia Pacific has grown through acquisition. They have a lot of different factories running different equipment. And some of that know-how on how to use the equipment was with the operators. And they saw that their operators were starting to age out and they were losing some of that institutional knowledge. In other cases, it was on physical manuals that were tucked behind the machine. Some of it had PDFs that were available on systems. They aggregated all of that information. They did interviews with experts. They took digital paper that they had, manuals that were available. They took online information that they had. They aggregated it all into a single system that they call ChatGP for Georgia Pacific. And this allows any user anywhere in their system to understand how a specific piece of equipment works. They can troubleshoot it in real time. They can gain from the institutional knowledge that's being lost as some of these very senior, very experienced employees start to retire. So it's augmenting the information and retaining a lot of the know-how that exists within these organizations that we don't even think about.